Well, thank you. It's good to be with you too. And it's good to see so many folks. And I know that we can relate to one another. I'm a grandmother. I've been around the block a few times, so I have a lot of experiences to share. And I want to tell you how to do that. The biggest question I'm asked is, how do I do it? And so we're going to go through that. So you might want to grab a pen and paper, or if you're a fast typer, you can just jot down things as we go. At the end, there will also be something that's going to be sent out to you if you request it on joggers for your memory. So I hope that will help you. So here we go. I don't know if any of you have read James Patterson's Sam's Letters to Jennifer, but in that, one of the characters says, and it's Jennifer actually, says, how many of us know the true stories of our parents and our grandparents? How many of us share the stories of our lives with our own children? What a loss to the children if we don't. What are we but our stories? And isn't that true? What are we but our stories? Okay, so why do we want to preserve these stories, these memories? Well, your family knows you right now, but do they know who you were before they were born, or they knew you? Who are you? You have backgrounds about which your families probably know nothing, not even your spouse, and sometimes not even your parents knew about you. Our kids weren't there in the years before they were born, but I'm sure that most of them would love to know about those years. And we are the product of our past generations, aren't we? Good or bad. The past has shaped us. So what is the legacy you're leaving your family? Well, we are the bridge between our kids, our grandkids, and the people who come after us, right? After them. It's easy to think that our kids remember what we remember. And they probably do remember stories that we've told multiple times to them. But there are other things they don't know, maybe about your parents or your grandparents. They don't remember them the way you do. We didn't ask our grandparents questions. I regret that I didn't. I knew some stories, but so many of them went to the grave with them. A senior citizen planting an apple tree was asked if she expected to benefit from its fruit or its shade. And she replied that she wasn't planting it for herself, but for her children and her grandchildren. And she said, as my ancestors have blessed me, so I bless the future by planting the generations to come. So think of your legacy like that apple tree. You've got to plant those seeds in order for them to remain growing forever. Some people say, oh, my life wasn't interesting. That is so wrong. Think of how much each of us have lived through, times that the history books may have ignored or have gotten wrong. We can fill in the missing pages with our living history. What seems trivial to you may be just a phenomenal event when these situations no longer exist. Think of the movie or the TV show, The Waltons. Most people remember that. It was a great story about life during the Depression. It was, some people might say mundane, but it was so interesting because we got to see not only the people, but their emotions of what they were going through. And that's important. Any sort of sensory, any writing that involves the senses is so important. The small joys, the triumphs, the turning points in life have a special meaning when we share them with those who know us, right? Okay, the next thing is people say, well, I am not a writer. Well, you don't have to be a writer. You can jot down anything. Have you ever written a letter? I have had people come to me with, just a pile of letters and say, what can I do with these? Well, you can publish letters. And when I say publish, I mean print them, bind them somehow. And that could be even stapled together or going to a printer and having them bound. Others say, I can't spell. Well, that's not much of an excuse anymore because computers will do this for you. And then people say, I'm not computer savvy. Well, you don't even have to use a computer. You can dictate your life story through some sort of a voice recorder. You can have your grandkids or someone else help you to write these things down. I mean, there's so many ways that you can preserve your legacy. What is really important is that you get the story down, that it's saved for future generations. It's the story that's important. And remember what James Patterson said, what are we but our stories? And that is so true. You can create a photo memory book. Remember when creative memory was so popular a few years ago? People were making these wonderful scrapbooks and putting pictures in and doing all this little doodling around and so forth. That's great, but you need the words to go with the pictures. How many of you have family pictures and you don't even know who the people are in them anymore? I have a drawer full of those, and it's such shame. I don't know where the pictures were taken, maybe the town, but I don't know whose house it was in front of, I don't know who it was. So make sure that if you're using pictures that you include some sort of caption with them. Otherwise, there too, when you're gone, so is the story. All right, if you have access to podcasts, Dolly Parton has put together a I think it's 7 series. Is it, Frida? You're nodding your head. Have you read those? Or not read them, but listened to them, I'm sorry. But Dolly Parton's America, she goes through what her simple life was. And we all know where she is today, and it's far from simple anymore. But it's worth listening to. Other people, Tara's mother-in-law is German. Tara's my daughter. She grew up in World War II Germany. She has an incredible story to tell of how they had to escape, how her father had to serve in the German army, and they never saw him after he left, and how the struggles they went through. And recently I had lunch with her, and she said, what's going on in Ukraine is so much like what she experienced in Germany. And I just want her to write her story down so much. There was another gentleman, and I published his book, and he's an exception, I will say, but he was a World War II tail gunner by the name of Forrest Clark. He was shot down several times. He was a prisoner of war, and for many, many years, he couldn't even talk about his experiences. But he finally did. When we lived in Florida, I was in a writer's group with this gentleman, and he was able to finally share his story. And what was amazing was how he overcame all of the adversity he experienced. And as he was writing, this whole story just unfolded about his life. He became a journalist when he came back to America. He interviewed Estes Kefauver. He interviewed Eleanor Roosevelt. Whose was it? One of the president's, Richard Nixon's security guards threw him to the ground when he got too close to the president. He wrote these things down, and that was incredible. We don't have stories like that. He did. We don't have stories necessarily like Tara's mother-in-law does. But there are other things. If you've lived in the same place all of your life, you still have stories. And I think about this. If people were born in a house and they're still living in the same house, if the house could talk, what would it say? Also, people who have been abused along the way, what they can share with their families and how they can help others overcome their situations. Whatever your story is, don't let it go to the grave. Now, the next thing is, how do you get in the mood to write? And even seasoned writers have this problem, and sometimes I do. I've been working on a novel for 3 years, so I can understand this. Sometimes it comes quickly. But what you want to do is find an area where you can comfortably write or record without interruption. It's important that you have this time to yourself. Sometimes if you play music, it can just trigger something to you. How many times do we think of a song and we can relate to where we heard that song, who we were with. And that's important too. You can sit on a park bench, at a picnic table, on a porch swing, sit in your favorite easy chair by a sunny window. There's no particular place, but it is a good idea if you can keep pen and paper with you at that chair or whatever. If you wake up in the middle of the night like I do sometimes, or you've had a dream about something and it triggers something about your past, it's a good idea to have pen and paper by your bed, because many times when you do wake up in the morning, you have forgotten what it was that you had thought about during the night. And another thing is, get a good night's sleep before you try to write. Sometimes just spend some time outdoors in nature. And as I said, keep writing implements close by, or a recording device, anything that will help you to capture the moments the minute they pop into your mind. Some people like to set aside a daily time to work on a project, maybe 30 minutes in the morning or in the afternoon. Don't try to accomplish everything in one sitting. That doesn't work very well. And then you will forget a lot of things that are really important. Pick one idea at a time. It's easier to write in small chunks, always. Now, as far as the writing or recording, if you've got grandkids around, let them help you. I'm sure that they would enjoy. Make it a family affair. Have them write down the questions that they wish they could have answers for. Let them interview you. It could be a fun family project. Watch era-specific movies. And the great thing about that is you can use your remote to pause and write down the memories that particular movie triggers. Back to the Future is a good one for me. How about Happy Days? We lived through these sort of days. Or think about the TV movies or the TV shows you used to watch. Remember Pinky Lee? Am I dating myself terribly with this? Howdy Doody, Sky King, Roy Rogers. Think about what was done in those, and you can maybe, like on Turner Broadcasting, I don't know, maybe you can even pull some of those up. Revisit places that were significant to you. Have you ever driven past the house where you grew up? If you have, you probably remember things. You might say, oh my gosh, it looks so different now. But think of it as when you lived there. Pull out pictures of the places you've lived and see what memories you can come up with. Sometimes it's those senses, like I said. What smells do you remember? Do you remember what your mom was cooking in the kitchen? Do you remember the colors in the house? Do you remember how you felt in that house? Were you spooked at night? Were there ghosts in your closet? Did you share a room with a sibling? And how did that work out? All right. Then another thing is, I mentioned having the kids interview. You get some family or friends rather to interview you and ask them what they remember about you. Another thing, some of us still go to class reunions. Great place to really instigate those memories. Pull out your old yearbooks, look through them. Think about the classes that you liked. Think about the teachers you liked or didn't like. Think about your favorite class or your least favorite class and why. And another thing, if you are going to write letters or dictate them, include as much as you can. My grandfather left some letters and I found them in an old trunk. And one letter he talked about back in the early 1900s, an evangelist came to his town. He grew up in Eastern North Carolina, and he and some of his friends went to see this evangelist. And he talked about they climbed up on a wall so that they could hear and see him. It turned out to be a baseball player who turned evangelist by the name of Billy Sunday. And it was just so exciting to think, here, I'm holding a letter that my grandfather wrote about a historic figure that he saw. Another thing you can do is go in and Google is wonderful. I'm sure you've all Googled a lot of things. but Google events that happened in a particular year and see what memories that brings about. At this point, don't worry about any order. You can arrange things later. Just like don't worry about any spelling. That can be done after you have all your material down or recorded. Then you can arrange it chronologically or thematically. You can go by early childhood, elementary school days, junior high school days, marriage, kids, whatever. Some people I know like to use index cards, and they will write a particular theme on those, and then what happened in first grade, who was my teacher, what about second grade, and so forth. And then once you have all your index cards together, then you can put them in some sort of order and compose your whatever order that you want there. But with each story, be sure to include the emotions that were involved. How did you feel about what happened? This may help someone else in your family who's going through something, to help them handle their emotions. The most significant stories really involve the use of senses. All right, let's see. Now let's go to the joggers, the memory joggers. And you don't have to write so much of this down because you will be getting these in that attachment. But write stories that are, I call it the song in your heart. Those are the stories that are the most important to you and would probably be most significant to your family. None of us are perfect. And try as we may, we can't be. We've had experiences that we might not want to share, but then again, as we have aged and gone through things, maybe it's okay to share them now. In most cases, I think our parents are long gone, and we can't get in trouble with them anymore. But you can share these things. Another thing you can do is just to reveal yourself. Like the moment, ladies, that you got pregnant. How did you feel? What was your reaction? What was your spouse's reaction? Or what about when you received or your parents received a diagnosis? What was the reaction from what the doctor said to what the doctor said? Describe the setting. If someone were following you around with a video camera when you experience these things, what would they record? And think of your life as a video. It makes it easier to remember things too. All right, what about writing about family members that your children and your grandchildren never met? Only things that you can remember at this point. How about describing a meaningful story about your parents or grandparents and how it influenced your life's decisions? Memories of your grandparents, where they lived. How did you get to their house? What about family reunions? How about grandma's cooking? We can all remember some of grandma's recipes, can't we? Did they have a well and an outhouse? Going to the outhouse at night was a horrible experience. I did that at camp, and I remember the fear that struck in my heart going out there. Favorite recipes. I talked about grandma's cooking. My grandmother never wrote anything down. She was what they called a dump cook. You dump this in, you dump that in. So if you wanted to know her recipe, you had to stand by her and write it down, because she didn't even know what she was cooking, but boy, it was delicious. And one family came to me, and this is a very simple one. It's just recipes for 2008. And they gathered things, pictures of the family, stories about the recipes, and then the actual recipe. So that would be a fun thing, even if you wanted to do a whole family book based on the food, the recipes. Such fun that is. All right, think about things that your grandparents did share with you. My grandmother shared that she made paper dolls out of whatever scrap paper she could find, because they were very poor, they were farmers. That's all they had. She talked about sleeping on a straw mattress. And one of my favorite stories was she always wanted an organ. And one day she was up in the attic playing with her paper dolls, and she looked out the attic window, and this horse-drawn wagon came up, and on it was an old pump organ. And her daddy had bought her an organ. And that was just the thrill of her life. So things like that that you can remember that your grandparents had shared with you. Hobbies, talents that you have in common with your parents, your grandparents, or other ancestors that may explain to your children, your grandchildren, why they have the talents that they do. What about family treasures? What are the history behind them? I think we all have something that belonged to somebody in the past. How did you get to school? Did you walk? Did you ride your bike? Did you ride a school bus, a city bus, subway? What about the yard you played in as a child and the games you played? Some are still played today, but probably not all of them. Have you seen kids play with marbles lately? I haven't. What was the neighborhood you grew up in like? Were all the mamas in the neighborhood your mama? If you did something wrong, did every mama on the block know? And you received punishment when you were bad at school? Did you get a spanking from the principal as well as mama and daddy? Yeah, times have changed, haven't they? What chores were yours when you lived at home? How about the things you did for leisure activities? Where did you swim? Where did you go skating? Did you have those skates with the key that you wore, you slipped your shoes into? I think we all did. Ice skating if you lived in parts of the country where you could, or skiing. Sports you played, basketball in the corner. Who taught you to cook? Or who taught you to use tools? And at what age do you remember when that happened? What was the very first thing you made? Did you ever get lost? Or did you ever deliberately run away? How old were you? Where were you found? By whom? Childhood illnesses, and how did they affect you? Chicken pox, measles, mumps, whatever. And did you ever have an accident and break a bone? What about the towns that you lived in? I lived in several towns growing up. And I talked about the houses. Describe the houses and how you felt about the creaky floors in there and things that would bump in the night. And here's a favorite memory of mine, the drugstore, the soda fountain at the drugstore. When the drugstore was a pharmacy and not a department store. We can remember those days. Remember the candy counter at Sears and Roebuck? Remember the smell of the peanuts when you walked in Sears? I'll never forget that. How about air raid rehearsals? I can remember those when I was in elementary school. How about days before we had air conditioning in our houses? How did we survive? What about your family car when you were growing up? Remember those hood ornaments? They were so cool, weren't they? Or the wings on the back of cars. I can remember a car that my parents had. It was a 49 Chevy. I've forgotten the particular model, but it had a strap on the back of the front seat. And as a kid, I used to hold onto that strap and pretend that I was riding a horse. So, you know, those things don't exist anymore. What about shopping at W.T. Grant or F.W. Woolworth? Wasn't that fun? What experiences they were. I can remember my mother would give me a quarter and I could walk around that toy counter for probably an hour trying to decide what I was going to buy with that quarter. How about favorite pets or your hangout after school? Where did you guys go? Family reunions. They could be good or they could be terribly boring when you were a kid. So you could share about those. And I can remember my grandmother said, only eat the food that we brought to the family reunion. Don't eat anybody else's because we don't know what's in it. Common things like home milk delivery. Remember the milkman coming and the little box you had to put the glass bottles in on the back porch or front porch? Or the farmer that brought his vegetable truck around once or twice a week? Did you have a house heated by coal? Did your mom have a wringer washer? Did you go down in the basement while she was washing the clothes? And we didn't have clothes dryers, remember? The clothes had to be hung. My mom sometimes hung them in the attic. Telephone party lines. I got in trouble a few times for listening in when I shouldn't have. Remember when your family got their first TV and how you felt about that? And remember when the first color TV shows came on? Bonanza, and what was the other one? Dinosaur, I think. Let's see. Washing Venetian blinds, taking those metal blinds down and putting them in a galvanized tub. I can remember doing that. So, I'm sure you're writing down other things that I'm hoping that I'm jogging your memory by some of these things I'm sharing. Your best friend and the things you did with that person, the trouble you got in with that person, the neighborhood grocery store, which was usually a butcher, and then he had other things there. I can remember going down and getting things for my mother and bringing them home, and it would just be put on a little tablet. And at the end of the week, mom would go down and pay the bill. Popular clothes. Remember Bleeding Madras? That was a mess, but it was fun. Did you have a Dr. Kildare shirt when he was so popular? Moo-moos, pedal pushers, bell bottoms, saddle Oxfords, crinolines. Ladies, did you have a crinoline that you sewed bells on at one time? A zoot suit with the reed pleats. Hairstyles, guys, did your parents use Brill cream, sorry. What about going to a movie? What's the cost of a movie ticket? Which actor or actress made your heart quicken? And speaking of prices, the cost of a car. What'd you pay for your first car? What was your car? What'd you pay for your first house? We paid less for our first house, my husband and I, than you'd pay for a car today. What did you pay for groceries? A candy bar, a soda, how much did that cost? Remember ice cream at recess when you could get it for a nickel? How about dance steps? I mean, we all remember the twists. What about the Popeye? Did you do the Popeye, the mashed potato, jitterbug? Our parents did the Lindy and the Charleston, most likely. Remember Motown and how popular the Motown, the Detroit scene was? American Bandstand, did you watch that? And Dick Clark? What were your favorite songs? Remember when a coffee house was not Starbucks, but it was a place that you went to hear folk music? Then you can always talk about summer vacations, going to grandma's and grandpa's, either in the big city or on the farm. Tell them about these experiences, especially if you had relatives who lived on a farm. This is sort of something that is gone by the wayside too, those memories. Favorite holidays and memories, Christmas, Hanukkah, traditions, or whatever you would celebrate during the holidays. Any pageants you might have participated in at school or in your religious institution, and maybe funny experiences, maybe some embarrassing experiences that you had with those. Remember when Thanksgiving was the beginning of the holiday season and not August? You can go into craft stores now, and they're showing the Christmas holiday projects earlier and earlier every year. Other seasonal memories that I thought of: churning ice cream. Remember that? Remember going to the ice house and getting that ice, taking it home? And at first it was so much fun to churn, and then it got harder and harder to do that. What about summer camp experiences or going to the beach as a kid? What about your first love, your first job, a disastrous blind date, your first reaction to the person you married? When did you know that he or she was the one for you? And your engagement, describe that, describe your wedding day. And then include stories about your spouse or significant other. What made you happy? What made you sad? Fun stories that humanize your kids for your grandkids, but nothing that they would not want shared. That's always fun. And if you want to get back at your kids, that's revenge of the kids. You tell those stories to your grandkids. Saturday night preparations for Sunday. I can remember my dad saying, okay, everybody bring their shoes down. And he would polish everybody's shoes so they'd be ready for Sunday morning. When did you move out of your parents' house? And where did you go? What was your first living quarter on your own like? Did you have roommates? And describe that experience. If you could be a teenager again, what advice would you give yourself? That's a good one, isn't it? What was your first job? Do you remember your salary? What did you do with the money? What about high school graduation? Can you recall that ceremony? How you felt? Did you keep up with any of your classmates over the years? And then why did you choose the career that you did? Is that the career that you dreamed of as a kid? If you went to college or were in the military or went right to work, describe your experiences. One thing that I would like to know more about, maybe some of you do, during Vietnam, there were a group of ladies called donut dollies. I think the men might have come across them in the battlefield. News clips of the movies. Remember we went to the movies and it always started with a news clip of the war? I can remember that. Then we have lived through so many things, national disasters, world disasters. And if you ask anybody, around our grandmother, grandfather ages, they would probably say 9/11 was the most significant event in their lives. But what about when JFK was assassinated, or Martin Luther King, Vietnam, the polio epidemic? What did we learn from national events, and how did they change us? And where were you when you heard? I can remember where I was when JFK was assassinated, and I can remember how I felt. We can describe how the whole nation reacted to that event, and others. And then there are other things, I just call these miscellaneous items. Whom do you consider the most significant leader in your lifetime, and why? Now, this is getting more away from your personal, but it's still something that might be of interest to your grandkids or kids. Is it true that as much as things change, they stay the same? Does history repeat itself? If you could turn the clock back, what would you change about your life? And describe how your faith has impacted your life and your decisions. Mistakes you've made, regrets you have, and how you handle them, that's important. Even though you might have been scared to step out. And how have your failures shaped you? And what lessons would you like to pass on to future generations about the experiences that you've had? And what people really affected the course of your life? Was it your teachers, your parents, siblings, leaders, whatever? Okay, now, let's say you've gotten all those answered, you've maybe had your index cards and you've got everything in order. Now what do? Well, you're either writing or you're dictating into some voice recorder. You can go to UPS store and have a book bound. You can go to Staples or any of the stores and have this done, or you can just staple your sheets together. People really don't care how it's bound. It's the fact that you have recorded your story. You can do this as a generational book. You can write stories. You can have your kids write some stories in there, and your grandkids. And this can be a living book, and it can, you can hand it down, and each generation can add more to it. I mentioned the creative memory books before. You can do that. You can just put all your pictures together, or a picture on a page, and then write. A picture's worth 1,000 words, so you ought to be able to get a few words out of a picture anyhow, and preserve those pictures. And letters. Letters are just wonderful in your own handwriting. It's so much more important there. You can take your composition in whatever form and read it at a library. Many libraries are open to this, or historical societies, or at your religious institution or schools. There's a lot of people who would be interested in what you've gone through. Another thing, if you are in a small town especially, or have a local newspaper, you can talk to the editor of the paper and see if they would start a column called The Way We Were. And you could submit some of your articles there, some of the parts of your story there. You can go to senior citizen centers and share. You can take copies of your books to assisted living facilities or nursing homes and let them enjoy what you've experienced, and then that's going to trigger some memories for them too. So there's so much you can do, but the thing is, you've just got to do it. You've got to take the time to do it just a little bit at a time, and you would be amazed if you would spend 30 minutes a day doing this. At the end of the month, look how much you would have written. At the end of 6 months, you would probably have it all done. Then after you have it all together, hand it to your kids, your grandkids, and say, have I missed anything? Are there gaps that you're still interested in finding out about me? And they'll tell you. And then you can go back and fill those in. This is something that is just, it can constantly correct it, or I don't want to say correct it, add to it. So that's what I tell people. That's what I wanted to share with you. And I will shut up now and see if anybody has any questions.
Wow. That was amazing. And as you know, in the chat, I mean, the memories that you brought back for so many, that these things that, I mean, even when just from the start of Pinky Lee, I mean, when you said that, there were so many people, their faces just lit up like, wow, things that you just forget about, you just don't, and then when someone says it, even the Waltons, when you said that, and then everybody with their, the Good Humor Truck and Mr. Softy and that song, when you heard that song in the summer, it was like amazing, right? But, and just so many people loved listening to all these wonderful things that do jog memory. So does anybody have questions or any, I know there was a question that came in on, I'm not a writer. I don't even know how to really put anything down on paper. Do I just put what order do I go in was really the question.
Just start writing. Just begin with whatever comes to your mind. If you're taking that 30 minutes a day, that's why I say play music of a time period that you lived through, watch those movies, but you don't have to worry, just put it all down. And those index cards help you to do that, and then shuffle it and put it in the right order.
Okay. So let's see, anyone else have any questions? Oh, Jen, okay, go ahead.
So when my grandmother came over from Russia, she documented everything and she wrote it down. And my mother, a few years, probably like 15, 20 years ago, it was like 10, 15 sheets of paper in her handwriting, which was beautiful. And I keep it upstairs, but when all of my children started going to school, they had to do like where they came from and supply stuff. And I had them each read this stuff, which was very interesting that they were able to have this stuff. And it was amazing how, came over on the ship, no food, the bad weather, and it's so unrealistic. My children are, in this century. So I mean, this time period, so they didn't even understand it, but hearing her words on this paper meant so much. It still means so much to me. So I think what you spoke about is just so wonderful, and everyone should do this at any point in their life.
I agree with you there. It doesn't have to be long, but I think if you do spend a certain amount of time each day, you'd be amazed at how long it is, because I mean, how many years have we lived? How much do we really have to share? And yes, it is so important. It's like that letter I had of my grandfather's too. I cherish that. It's history in your hands. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And Linda had chatted that her mother and herself took a Write Your Life story class for several years, and her mother went 25 years. She has many stories that she finds extremely wonderful since her passing 7.5 years ago. And she's trying to get them in a book form. Never give up. Start with one paragraph. We were taught to take one item and write a paragraph and go from there.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the more you write, the easier it is to write too.
Yes. It just starts to flow. You start
Yes.
getting that energy and just sort of everything just sort of just comes, and then you just, wow. And things that we never really had thought of in the past, just those memory joggers that we are going to send in a recap. So everything that Swanee talked about, we will have in a recap, as long as we have your email address, which should be, as long as everybody's name is up on their screen, we should have your email address. If it just has an iPhone or it says iPad, we won't be able to send that. So you might want to chat us in the chat box, or you could always email us if you don't receive it. But as long as we have your email, your name, we should have it. So I think RA, you had asked about that. I don't know who RA is, but we, if you want to message us your email, just so we make sure you do get that in the recap. Again, is there anybody else that has more questions or anything that comes to mind? Now would be the time. Betsy, you want to ask something? Hold on, you're on mute, Betsy. 1 second. If you want to unmute.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I just have to say that your joy when you're talking, it was so joyful and wonderful to listen to you. I hope that you record your stories as well as write them, because your voice is just so beautiful.
Oh, I thank you. You just made my day. Thank you so much.
In some ways you made mine, so thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, it's very soothing. It was very like therapeutic to listen to, just you speaking and saying that you're a good like storyteller. You know, that's why you write and tell stories. And that's why you wrote 8 novels. So now there we go. Makes sense. So anyone else, questions, anything, just if you're thinking about writing it or how to get started, just like Swanee said, just starts with a thought and just go from there. Anything that you think is important is, you know, things that we think, just like the little things that you mentioned are just, you know, just what you did with your best friend, when you got in trouble, if you thought about running away, these things you never think about telling that story unless it's, you know, really funny or something happened from it. Right. But those are great things. I see that Barbara E, if you want to unmute. Hold on, let's unmute Barbara E. Hang on. Barbara E, oh, go ahead.
I just wanted, I loved all the memories like everybody else, but I wanted to tell you about a gift my daughter gave me a couple of years ago. And it was a journal type book that said my mother's story. And on each page, starting from early childhood, going all the way up through your life, there was a question or a topic or something, and you wrote a page about what this was in your life. And I, knowing that I could sometimes put things aside, I made it my duty to write 1 or 2 pages every day so I could finish it while I was still alive. And she really appreciated that I did it, and it brought back a lot of memories of my life and things that I can see in her that do come back to me, that we are alike in a lot of ways. And it really was a very interesting experience, putting down on paper all those things that had been in my life, the names of people and things that you like to do. And sometimes they were a little bit more difficult and probing questions, but it was a great experience. And I definitely am going to do this. Thank God, before my mother passed away, my mother was also born in Russia, and they were extremely wealthy there, but they had to leave and had to leave everything behind. And I sat down one day with my mother and just had her, which she couldn't remember all that much because she was only 7 when they came here, but had her just talk extemporaneously, and I recorded it about what she remembered about their house. They lived in a mansion, and about my grandparents taking a troika to Kiev to the opera, and it was just right out of Dr. Zhivago.
Right.
And I treasure that recording so much. And I'd like to do that too, because I think also hearing the person's voice telling the story when they're no longer there, great ways to share your memories.
It certainly is. Great idea. Can I ask, did any of you come up with any other memory joggers that I did not mention that you'd like to share with us?
And there was a few in the chat for sure. There was definitely some in the chat. I do see Marilyn, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for sharing, and you really prompted a lot of memories for me. And several years ago, my family, our siblings decided to get together. We get together for Thanksgiving anyway. My sister started it. She said, we were talking about things that we remembered. And of course, we all remembered something different. So we decided that we were going to, throughout the year, just write down, what do you remember? Things that you remembered. And then when we get together at Thanksgiving, we were going to compile it. And when I moved, I had lived in my mom's house. She passed away. I found a box. I was just going to throw it away because I said, this box hasn't been open for years. What could it contain? I opened the box and I found a love letter that my dad had written to my mom. It was
Wow.
amazing. The papers were yellow, but we recognized his handwriting. Even after he had become an adult, his handwriting was basically the same. And so now my sister has that letter in like a, the plastic sleeve. So we're trying to
That should be framed.
compile all these things.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, amazing. That you definitely should frame that letter. I mean, I know she has it, but maybe make a copy and then frame. It's just such a wonderful memory. That's so lovely. Warren, you have your hand up there, and I do see that James added his memory of swimming, learning how to swim was one that yeah, that's definitely a good one if you remember that.
And learning how to drive too.
Yeah, taking the road test.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing, right? Warren, go ahead.
Can this be done effectively on a voice recorder? I could see problems with knowing what you had on there. There's so much, information. Would you have to keep some kind of a log of what you put on there?
Not necessarily. I mean, you can just tell it as you remember it. I don't think anybody would be concerned about that. You can get an awful lot on a thumb drive,
Oh, yeah.
So I think that'd be a great idea too. Yes.
I'm too lazy to do the other part. I fall asleep.
Whatever works, Warren, whatever works. If that works,
right.
someone's gonna be very happy one day to hear that and play it. So
Yes.
by all means, yeah. And Ken, if you want to unmute, I see you're trying to raise your hand there. So if you want to unmute and ask a question, you can unmute. Hang on. There we go. Go ahead, Ken.
I remember as a young lad that the cost of going to the movie, the popcorn and a drink was less than a quarter. My father had to struggle and work hard to save up a quarter to give to me and to my brother so we could go to the movie on Saturday.
Yeah.
And they had the serials where you could watch, and then something would happen and you would have to go next week to see what happened and see how the hero got out of the problem he was in. I guess that dates me just a bit. But yeah, that was quite the deal. And Lone Ranger and Hopalong Cassidy
Mhm,
and some of those people were popular back in the day. So,
that's true.
but I had another question I wanted to ask. I thought other people might know the answer to it, and it slipped out of my mind. That happens when you get old. So I'll just let it
You
go at
think of
that.
it, you
Thank
could
you.
chat it in, you can chat it into us and I'll ask, but if not, don't, no worries. But if you do think of it, we can definitely get
Thank
back
you.
to you. But Gail asked if you have any more organizational tips or strategies once the stories are saved.
Not other than what I have shared with you. I think I've just about poured out my brain to you.